lessons to be learned about our league, about being a sports fan, and frankly about life. That there is no reset button. I think everyone in the league has a pretty good idea that I'm a fan of the Cleveland Cavaliers, and they unceremoniously have had their season end in 5 games for a second straight year at the hands of a team that, you know, I think most expected we'd do better against. But this isn't your classic simulation game. This isn't Madden. This isn't 2K, where you simulate through these games and somebody doesn't go your way. You hit the reset button and you come back and look, you sweep them this time. Doesn't work like that. Same token with the draft. I wanted that player to fall. I wanted to try and address that position of need. I wanted this to happen, and it didn't. Not a reset button. But what a lot of teams do better than others, and what makes the really good teams when it comes to the draft, are the ones who are able to read the room, make the moves they got to make, and still get what they need out of their team and out of their draft at the end of it. That's what we want to try and recap here today. So right now it's just me. I might have had more if I had gone live last night, but sometimes when you're waking up every morning at 4 in the morning and going to bed at 10 o'clock at night, you get tired and you need just to go to bed at 8 o'clock. And that's kind of where I was last night. So that didn't happen last night in terms of me going to bed early, but it was a good restful evening and gave me the energy I needed to come at it again tonight. So right now it's just me as Vikings, and we'll see if anyone else pops on. But I wanted to recap the draft. We had gotten through most of the third round when we had signed off last time. I'm not going to spend time going through all the picks in the fourth and the fifth round, although I said this in chat, and I think I said it on the pod last time, and I want to make a special note of it. I truly enjoy that run that tends to happen every year, and it's a different length every year. Sometimes it's a couple of picks. Sometimes it's like 2 rounds, like it was this year, where everyone in every single pick, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams deep, are trying to move into that pick because they want a player and they're convinced that this is a spot they've got to move into to get it. And it's activity, it's fun. Even if the team doesn't take any of the offers, it's a nice run where you just kind of get to look at it and say, is what I'm going to pick here worth what I'm turning down? And it felt like kind of from about the 206 to the middle of the fourth round, which is a really long way and a huge amount of the draft. Every single pick was getting greeted with that kind of offer enthusiasm. So that's fantastic. I love it when we have activity. I love it when we have interest. I love it when we have passion in the league. So for those who made the draft everything it was and had a lot of fun with it and really took it seriously, bravo, well done. I'm not going to say that we've got the crystal ball on all of these picks. Frankly, the more research I'm doing after the fact, the more I'm learning about this draft. There's players that I either poo-pooed or said I have no idea who they are, that a week later I have a better idea of what's going on, probably why you picked those players, and some names behind some of these positions. So luckily, I have RJ who's joined me in this process, so I don't have to do it by myself. And you guys just don't have to listen to my voice for an hour and a half, which I got to say, RJ is probably a much better deal having you as a good balance and common sense and voice of wisdom compared to the general blabbery of mine.
Well, I appreciate that. I think we both are have some crazy takes, so it just it makes it more exciting. Two ridiculous opinions instead of one.
I agree. So what what I'm going to do right now is I've gotten to the draft report screen of the website, and I'm just going to filter it by team and look at who got picked and kind of what I think in terms of that crop of players versus kind of where the team is and whether I like it, I don't like it, or kind of an incomplete grade at this point. We won't go, you know, you know what? I don't know. What do you think, RJ? Do you think we can go letter grades on this, or do you want to go pass, fail, incomplete?
Uh, Pass, fail, incomplete seems a little bit better because we might be a little bit lower as far as grades on some things that just need to shake out.
That's fair. So we'll start with that. We'll start with the top. We'll start with the Steelers. So I hate to start in a negative, but this feels like a fail to me. Um, 3 third-round picks. I like the Xavier Watts pick in terms of the talent, but I don't love the landing spot. Um, that said, great value there. Trevor Etienne, I don't know if that's ever going to turn out. And then a lot of the depth there is what feels like you know shots, but stuff that's going to end up being a roster clogger for a team that really needs points in a bad way. And I talk about this in previous episodes where it's would it have been better for a team to use the amount of years and the amount of draft capital on these picks, or to trade them for players that would have been worth it or going for those picks. And I feel like the Steelers, the players that would have been accessible or getting offered for those picks would have been a better approach versus where he went, especially for what the team needs are. So I'm going to start off with a fail for the Steelers.
I will agree with that. The 306 and the 322 were probably better suited to like be turned into productive veterans. And then when you get into the fourth and the fifth rounds, they're long shots. So like, what is it, one, two, five of them? Yeah, I'd rather use those 20 years on, you could have packaged all five of those together, sold them to one of the teams that's trying to get rid of some vets and maybe picked up, an old expensive wide receiver or, a less desirable position but a slightly better player.
Yep. So I hate to start on a negative note, but that's kind of what I feel there. And look, I can't even give the Packers just have to be a fail. The only player picked was in the fifth round, Ruben Hippolyte. So giving this grade a fail just feels lazy, but um, you know that's not a whole lot you can say about the Packers draft class, considering that they seem primed to enter a rebuild and have maybe one more year of going for it in front of them, and didn't have the draft picks really to do anything, but didn't commit to either extending the window or getting ready for the rebuild. So I'll go with a fail for the Packers as well.
So with only using one of the picks, one of the two that he had, I I'm just gonna go with an incomplete because I like the player and I like where he drafted him. I don't think that there were many players drafted in the fifth round that had decent draft, like real life draft capital used, and I don't know if you're finding many like uh, backup middle linebackers in that group. So like good. There is somebody definitely ahead of him as far as a starter, but it definitely used that pick wisely, the one that he did. So we'll wait and see if this guy ends up being productive. It might be decent.
Yeah, I guess that's probably the more prudent way of doing it. But like I said, it's good to have your wisdom to balance out my craziness. Browns, I'm going with a reluctant pass. Again, he is the way his roster is shaped up. He is a contender for the Super Bowl this year. We're talking about a mid-second, a late third, fourth, and fifth here. So we're not expecting earth-shattering stuff here. But same kind of concept as with the Steelers. If I'm having 20 years worth of contracts coming here, I think I'd want to spend it differently if I'm a team really going after a title with a fifth of what my year allocation is going to be than this. But I like the players, I like the talent. I just it just seems incongruent in terms of where that team is.
Yeah, I would also give it a pass just based on probably the first two picks. Decent enough players to is in regards to like where they were drafted. I think that they were fine. Probably some of the better options that were available at 211 and 332. So like that was fine. The fourths and fifths, they're the Gabriel pick, that's fine. Probably needs to take some shots on some quarterbacks. And Amos, not a bad idea. He's going to be a starter. Never mind. He has Herbert now, so he doesn't even really need to take shots on quarterback. Yeah, it's pass, but basically the three players that are going to have some playing time in real life. That's mostly the reason.
Yeah, and I'd say he's if you look at the players he picked and the concept of what you want to do in the draft, he's picking a year ahead in a lot of cases. Fannon's probably going to get worked in slowly but surely with Cleveland, so that's a nice plan ahead pick, especially if Goddard is on his last legs potentially in Philly. Makuba, same story at safety. Philly's going to work him in over time. Cleveland has the ability to wait on some of this stuff. So I like the players. I like the talent, especially considering where it was picked. But again, it's the reluctant passes just because of some of the other investment needed.
I think a good way to explain it, because we'll probably end up saying this a handful of times more, is like if you're a team that isn't trying to tank this year, if you're doing anything other than just shooting for a top three pick, if you have an overabundance of like fourth and fifths, we're probably going to hate on it a little bit because you could have used the years, like on contract years, far better. Like, I think that's one of the big things that we'll probably criticize.
Yeah, because I mean, as much fun as it is to take these picks, and super excited for a lot of, frankly, my picks that I have in the fourth and fifth round, I'm going to miss on most of them. That's just the nature of the beast here. So, kind of making sure there's that dose of reality sprinkled in.
Yep.
First bit of positivity from me, Ravens. These guys are a pass for me. I like it. Only 3 picks, starting with a supplemental third being his first one, getting Brashard Smith. I think that's a good pick. I like the Curtis Rourke pick as well, not just because he's a 49er. I liked him as a prospect, and I think he's going to be a good fit in that system. And frankly, there's not a really good backup already in San Francisco. So Rourke legitimately could be the backup to Brock Purdy and be, one bad fall away from some serious playing time here. So I think that's a great ad for the 5th round there as well.
Yep, I agree. Pass. I love the Brashard pick, the Brashard Smith pick. That was fantastic.
And then the Texans, I have it as a pass as well. Again, half the picks I like, half the picks I'm not sure about. So overall, that gets you a passing grade. This isn't necessarily like a DS4 diploma type situation. JT Tuimalu, I think, was the right place to take him. He's going to get worked in over time in Indy, but, Ohio State guy, good pick. Cody Simon, again, I am unsure about, but I understand. Chris Paul was a big name before the draft. Definitely some opportunity in that Rams linebacking core. Will Howard was trying to trade up for like a madman. The fact that he fell at 409, I think, is a travesty, but great pick for the Texans. And then Phil Maffa. How Jaden Blue is worth a borderline first, and I don't think he was a first year, I think it was a second here. But then Phil Maffa, who went, I think, 2 actual rounds later in terms of the NFL draft, goes 2 full rounds later in our draft. Again, just seems asinine that, we got a day 3 running back who's going to get plugged in and should be thought about as a first round pick in fantasy. But another day 3 pick is a complete afterthought. Part of that process just seems silly. So, it was smart of Texans to stop the fall. So, again, he's very top heavy on his team. So he needs some of these things to hit. And again, the thing I don't love about this, again, is, like we said, this is going to be a common theme. About 30 years worth of contracts. 30% of your roster is tied up with this. That's not going to help you win games. So basically, coming out of the draft, the Texans needed to break some things down and or supplement their current starters, probably to start holding off the Jags, and really that's probably the only real challenger he's got this year. And he came out of the draft saying, I don't think the Jags are necessarily going to get any better. I'm fine staying on 16 or 17, which can win you some blackjack hands and can lose you a couple too. So we'll see how we feel what the Jags did, but I think the Texans did the equivalent of staying on 16.
I agree. I do like the Will Howard, the Phil Maffa pick. I think that those were great value. I would actually say that this is an incomplete because a lot of these, for me, because a lot of these guys are going to have to really step up for me to like this, and they are the caliber of players that will be given those opportunities. So I don't necessarily hate it. I think you said it correct, and like the area that some of these players were picked at, particularly the first 3, like those are exactly where I would have expected them to be picked. So that's fine. But they're going to have to be productive for me to really like this.
Yeah. Colts, this is a weird sliding scale. So I'll go ahead and say incomplete for now. But it's really hard to, and I've also that is a bit of a cop out because I've beaten the horse. Colts said they weren't going to pick this year because they wanted to keep points down. Gave up future capital to move into this draft. Take players who aren't probably going to impact their points much, but again, went against what their strategy was going to be. So the entire thing just feels disjointed. But as mentioned, Jackson is probably going to take some time to get worked in Buffalo. Scourton, same kind of situation. He traded for him as a rookie after he was picked by a different team. But I'll include him there. Harmon, same kind of thing. He's going to get worked in. but still have some opportunity to step in immediately. So it's got to be incomplete just because the thesis on these players is he didn't want to pick up points, and these are guys who may not pick up points immediately. And if that works, then it's definitely a pass and a win for him because those will be players that'll start scoring next year as he wants them to start scoring. They may not wait though. So again, it's a matter of if they start scoring points instead of fail. I don't know. Like I said, I've tied myself in knots on this one, so I just got to call it incomplete and move on.
I'll give him a pass just because I like the first two picks. I think that they were great picks, especially for what he's trying to do. And they're players that I'm fond of. The other the two fifth rounders are just junk. I hope he didn't put many years behind them. Yeah. I'm not overly fond of the fifths, but yeah, it's fine.
Yep. Jags is an absolute pass. Again, I would like this draft a little bit more if he was able to hit some of the holes he had. I think maybe there's a different player at one or two of these spots that I would have taken based off of the needs that I had if I was Jags. But that said, staying pat and coming out with Caleb Johnson as one of the big five running backs who steps into a great situation in Pittsburgh, Arroyo, and that is what I'd call second tier of tight ends, kind of the end of where that was, and being able to nab that in the second is good value. Really like Jeff Bassa in the third. Alfred Collins is going to be one of those space eater D tackles. But that said, those have been productive in San Francisco's season or scheme. And then Alexander and Lindbergh, I think, are good late shots too. So I really like the players that Jags took. It wasn't a perfect fit in terms of where his needs were, but he drafted for talent and continued to build the team. If you draft for talent, though, what's the other side of that, RJ?
If you draft for talent,
yeah,
I don't. What are you asking? I'm sorry.
You have to be active in the trade market. If you aren't trying to draft for specific needs in addition to talent, you need to be active in the trade market to take positions of surplus and strength and parlay those into where you're weak. The Jags, for example, really need another starting receiver. They now, with Caleb, have two, potentially three starting running backs plus some depth at the position between Kyron Williams, Josh Jacobs, and Caleb Johnson stepping in there. Not a bad position to be in, but now it's a matter of how do you parlay depth into a better starting roster. I think he's put himself in a position to do that, and a couple of small moves here, and I think he edges ahead of Texans as the favorite in the South. And look, yes, I have the Texans first next year. This isn't me trying to pump them up to try and move the pick. I could give a shit if I move it. This is just my God's honest, straightforward opinion on what's going on in the division.
Yeah. This is one that I would actually fail just for not addressing actual needs and using way too much value for redundancy. So a similar point that you were trying to get by. I don't necessarily hate the Caleb Johnson pick, at least as far as where he was taken, but I hate it for the Jags. Like, just take a wide receiver. I'd imagine there was a comparable one at 112. The Elijah Arroyo pick is starting to look a little bit better. And the rest of them, I don't think very highly of him. Not overly fond of Walker, although he is going to get an opportunity. Bassa doesn't move the needle for me. Alfred Collins was a second round defensive tackle taken in the third round of our draft. I don't know if I'm taking somebody with that draft capital in the third round. like especially at that like undesirable position.
Yeah, and again, that's why it's good to have multiple opinions on these things. Titans has gone full rebuild here. Incomplete. Drafted Trey Harris, but has moved him in a subsequent trade. Shador, we got to see how things turn out in Cleveland. Everything else is a late dart throw. So much of Titans draft is going to be based off of what happens down the line here, and I just don't have enough information, so we'll go incomplete with them right now.
I can agree with that. I love the Sanders pick. Just take a shot on a quarterback, especially like when he's probably not going to be trying to win too many games this year. So I like that just as a way to like hopefully gain value. I don't hate any of the players that he took. I'm pretty fond of the safeties that he took. But yeah, I would say incomplete because you can't really base it off of just 4th and 5th round dart throws.
Yep.
He is one of the teams that should have been making all of those picks and did a fantastic job of like picking stuff. So I won't fault him like we have, teams that are trying to compete for using years unnecessarily. So
Yep. So the Bills probably give me my biggest conundrum because in the draft, the players he took at these positions, I think there was more value on the board than what he took. But that said, he's an absolute pass, and he might have the best draft that we've looked at so far because he took high upside players at each positions, each spot in the draft. It sets the ground that and the seeding that he can kind of grow from, and everything's a premium position. Tight end, he took probably arguably the most valuable tight end fantasy-wise in the draft. Hit the receiver button multiple times. Jalen Noel in Houston, Jalen Lane in Washington, Elikai Amore in Tennessee. 3 receivers out of this class, and those 3 receivers, I think, all have opportunities to really jump in value. Hit the end, hit linebacker, Milroe in Seattle. It's not unreasonable that he's a starter in Seattle next year, and with his rushing ability, that's top 15 value right there. So I don't love a lot of the picks he made, but the net result, he's got a great setup to kind of grow his team here. So now it's just got to go the right direction. So a pass.
Yeah, definitely a pass. I think this is a fantastic draft. The only players that I'm personally not a fan of were Stutzman and Gillette, and I know that there is a lot of people that appreciate them in this league, so they couldn't have been terrible picks. So yeah, fantastic, and I do agree this is probably the best draft that we've seen so far.
Well, then we go one more, and we have to revoke that. Dolphins are a pass. They had a shit ton of picks in this draft, and I really like what they did at a lot of the picks that they made. Trevion Henderson, Luther Burden, Jackson Dart, guys are going to have all the talent that may take a year, and Dolphins can afford to wait. Great picks there. Loveland, top 10 pick at tight end, profile that almost always hits. Schweichinger, end of the first round linebacker with Cleveland, especially with now JOK going on IR and PUP. he's got a clear path towards immediate value. Mike Green, there's a great video circulating the internet right now of a Eagles fan losing it because Mike Green didn't fall to them and going to Baltimore instead, which just tells you all you need to know there. Jack Sawyer, fourth rounder, but guy just, if he didn't go to Pittsburgh, I don't know where else he would have gone. He just kind of just looked like the part that he needed to go to Pittsburgh. Smail Mondon, again, Georgia linebacker going to Philadelphia. Stop me if you've heard this before. Restrepo in the fourth, pretty highly regarded receiver who fell based off of a bad 40 time. Great shot to be taken there. Same with Quinn Ewers. So across the board, finding value all over the draft that he gets to continue to build from. And he's building out this team. So not a lot of this is going to change his score for this year. He's got one more year to build. The only knock is with the amount of draft capital he has for next year, he's going to find himself in a real bind that a lot of these guys are not going to be cuttable after 1 year. He's still going to be waiting on these. So he's going to have 60 years or so right here that he's going to have to figure out what to do with, while he also has draft capital for another 60 years that he's ready to use for next year, in addition to everything else on his team. So it's going to be consolidation time. I know he's wanted to kind of put off some of the harder decisions about team management, I think, till next year, and he has the ability to do that based off his roster. But, that's going to be the one downside of a draft like this.
I'm going to reluctantly give this a pass. It was a fantastic draft up until 213. And then, in my opinion, it kind of went off the rails, and he could have taken players with better opportunities with most of these, other than Restrepo. I think that home run in the fourth round. The Tyleik Williams pick was also a good one. Nice potential gem there in the future. But the rest of the the mid seconds, the fourths, the fifths, you've already said it, he's going to have a problem with managing the years, and those just aren't the type of players that I want 4 years attached to.
Yeah, I think so. That'll be the challenge, but that's, for a building team, one of those considerations you have to make. Jets will give a pass. Ben Morrison, Caleb Ransaw, late fourth, late fifth. Good value there. Grab a corner, grab a safety. He didn't have a whole lot of draft capital and took what he needed. Would have liked to see maybe a couple of other moves made by Jets, but he came in, got what he needed to get from his draft capital, so I'd give him a pass for that.
Yep. He got a third-round safety in the fifth, and he got a second-round corner in the fourth. Nothing wrong with that.
Pats. I think I have to go incomplete here, because look, Isaiah Bond is the definition of incomplete, because his legal situation caused him to fall and still not get signed. As soon as that clears up, he's going to have a team. If it doesn't clear up, then that's a very valuable pick to waste there. Everything else, yeah, as I talk, I have to fail Pats. But I like Mason Taylor. I like Jalen Royals. I like Mason Graham. I like the audacity of the Bond pick. I like the deals he was making through the draft on some of the players that he traded for, like a Trey Harris. When a team doesn't control their picks for the next year, you need to be making different decisions. I love the I don't give a fuck type attitude that Pats does this with, because it adds a dimension to the league that keeps it being fun and showing that he's having fun. But if I'm actually assessing moves being made, I can't do a pass or an incomplete for this. I have to fail what he's saying, because these are all high upside swings. These aren't things you do if you don't control your draft future, or you don't have the depth to give yourself to make those kind of swings.
That's fair. I can agree with that. That they are very high variance type of players. But I would also give him a pass. I think that he made some great decisions. I think picking Mason Taylor in the late first was an awesome pickup. I think Royals was a very bold pick, but I like it. I'm unsure how I feel about Mason Graham. At one point, I liked him. I just don't know how I feel about him in Cleveland more than anything. We still have to see what happens with Isaiah Bond. I love the Nick Nash pick. I love the value that he got with the picking up Trey Harris. So I would give him a pass just because I think when you include the acquiring Trey Harris, I think this is a fantastic draft for him.
Yeah, I understand. Just it's a whole lot of TBD on there. But if he gets a couple to break through, again, like you said, if Trey Harrison and Jalen Royals is getting rave reviews from the from Kansas City camp, I mean, almost everybody got rave reviews from rookie camp right now, but he's one of the ones who stood out from camp reviews so far. So if that continues, then he's going to earn that grade for sure. Broncos did not make a pick, so he doesn't need to get a grade. Chargers, we'll give this a pass because these are all late round swings. Some could work out, none could work out, but Tez Johnson likes the talent. He's still there at the end of the fourth to take a shot. Donovan Edwards coming into the draft. Regularly the draft time last year, everyone thought when he came out he would be probably a first or second round pick. Did not turn out that way. Fifth round, take a shot. Same with Hunter Wooler. So Chargers doesn't need any of those to necessarily pan out, but they're great lottery tickets in the right place in the draft to take those good picks.
Yep, completely agree. I think the Tez and the Donovan pick were fantastic. The right places to pick them, and I hope they hit, because then I will pay him far more than a fourth and fifth in a year or two for him.
So I need to preclude my next statement here with a couple of comments. I have not, and nor is any member of my family being held for ransom. I'm of sound mind and sound body as I make this statement. The Chiefs have my highest grade so far in terms of if I was giving a team who was picked, fit of the team, need of the team, and the value for pick. Shaw is dead nuts. What he needed, where he needed it, and with the retirement of Carr, he has his heir apparent on a rookie deal at the end of the first round. That's sensational. Savion Williams is in the mix for one of the top 3 roles in Green Bay, and he got that in the mid-third. Arian Smith is a high upside goose type of player. He's going to catch 15 balls for 250 yards and 3 touchdowns. And because of that, he's going to score in 3 games for Goose, and that's more than return on the 411. So it's exactly what he needed on his team, exactly where he needed it, and he got every one of these picks as a value.
I give it a pass. I'm not super high on it. I think that the Shuck pick was home run. The Williams pick is fine. I do think he is going to be one of the wide receivers that has a huge opportunity, and I do expect him to carve out a role. The Smith pick, like you said, probably a fine pick. He probably will be productive in a handful of games this year. Yeah, I may not necessarily have it as highly valued as you do or highly ranked, but I do have it as a pass.
Yeah. Raiders fail. Players he got at positions at the place he got them. 15 and 17 could have returned legit starters, and with Lamar Jackson and a number of other pretty solid players on his team. I know he's taking more of a longer view and getting younger, but he could have gotten younger or moved out of these spots and gotten some of these same players or quality players for these. Um, I yeah, I say value wise miss, team need miss. Um, yeah, so I got to fail on this class.
I can agree with that. It's either a fail or an incomplete for me. Not overly fond of who he took in the first round, either of the picks. I'm interested enough to, like I want to see how they do. I don't think that they were complete whiffs. But then we get into like the third round picks, and I'm not overly fond of any of those, other than I would probably say Revel, and that's just by he took a third round a corner with the third round draft capital in the fifth round, which I think that was fine. But other than that, I will agree it's a fail.
All right, let's move to the NFC. Bears will go with incomplete because he's starting to turn the corner towards relevance. Invested a lot of draft capital in players who are going to start scoring some points for him. And then on draft day, traded a lot of his draft capital kind of at the end of the first, the second round for future considerations. So I think there's more to come in terms of does he sit and wait with that draft capital as the Bears are finally in a position where they're sort of in a solid position with draft capital, whereas for years that was not the case, while also having a team that is growing with him. But again, it's how that gets deployed. Again, whether that's wait until next year to start deploying it is going to be what really impacts that grade. So I'll go with incomplete for now. But I do like the Jalen Walker pick, especially now that he's been converted at the end. I think there are people who didn't love the talent, but still, end of the first round, taking a guy at a premium position who went in the real draft 15 or so picks higher is a nice grab, especially when it's a player who can step in immediately for Atlanta. Obviously, they double tapped the position, but I think Jalen was the guy who they took first, and for good reason. Did I lose you, RJ, or you're still there? All right, RJ will jump back in when he's ready. Lions. Yeah, I talked about it during draft. I've got a fail grade here, but again, not necessarily because of the players he took, the way he used his draft capital in this. At the end, it's you need running backs and you hope one of them pans out. Great. Grabs Tootin, grabs Blue, grabs Neal, Ollie Gordon. Four players that he's spending 16 years on, where he probably could have traded that capital and gotten pretty solid return for it, and a much more solidified position, especially in a division that is very winnable right now. Obviously, I'm coming forward as well, but Packers is not a shoe-in. I'm not a shoe-in. We've got a tough schedule. It's going to be a bit of a free-for-all for the division, and Lions is definitely in the mix of it. And I'd rather have sort of the evil I know versus whatever those four running backs turn into. And based off of how these things usually go, it's probably going to turn into a whole lot of nothing. So a fail on the Lions. Bengals. I don't know. I'll go with pass because Darian Porter in the 5th. He was the last corner I really thought was worth it the draft. And of course, Bengals grabs him right before one of my picks, I believe. So damn him for that. And because of that, I got to give him a pass for his draft. All right. I'm up. Obviously, everybody's happy with their draft. Anybody who is come out of this saying, I don't feel great about my draft or I don't like what I did, that kind of tells you all you need to know. And I'm happy with what I came away with. I've got a good balance on offense, plugged in some good values on defense, wanted to trade up for players, and I still got one in the 3rd that I wanted to grab. And I like a lot of the upside of what I took in the 4th and the 5th. And using 3 years instead of 4, I still get the benefit of the rookie contract, but have the ability to extend them after their 2nd year if any of these guys do something worthwhile. I mentioned that I was looking at Porter right before the 518, but Cam Miller was one that if the GOAT says go draft this player to his team and they go draft that player, I'm willing to give it a listen. So that's my Cam Miller logic beyond what has already been said. But obviously, I'm giving myself a pass for my draft. Getting surprised there.
You're on your team?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would give it a pass. I mean, just look at the first 4 picks. Home run.
Very happy there. Bucks will give a pass. Traded a lot to get Cam Ward at 102. And then his next pick was Mitch Evans at 505, who I had a draftable grade on him. I think it was a 3rd or 4th round grade to tight end. And look, Carolina's tight end room is not solved. Sanders is on Buccaneers team, so it's a bit of a hedge there as well. They extended what's his name?
Is that the one from like East Carolina a few years ago?
Yeah.
His name Tommy Tremble.
Tremble, thank you. Extended Tremble at a reasonable contract, but again, definitely a pass for Buccaneers. And definitely an A for effort because I know he was one of those teams that was trying every single pick to get into the draft. So that stretch, I think poor Chauncey Golston got offered to about half the league there. But, A for effort on that front as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just off of the Cam Ward pick, solid.
Yep. All right. Falcons up next. I'll go with an incomplete, although early returns on Jimmy Horn are looking good for that 507, but 507 does not a draft make, although first pick coming in the supplemental, that's kind of what you're going to get. So incomplete, but I mean, it's kind of these are all shots in the dark, and you hope for the best.
I would say fail. That's 16 years of basically junk other than Jimmy Horn. No, like I'm pretty sure this team's still trying to compete, so I would have just taken Jimmy Horn at 434 and skipped the other 4 picks instead.
All right. Panthers getting James Pierce on 131. Felt pretty good about that, especially since the Falcons give up their own first next year to move up and get him at a premium. So, although he had Pierce on the block, I think he had his entire rookie class in the block, but that was probably more of a shtick. I think that's probably the only pick I really liked from his draft class. I think Alpenstad is showing well in San Francisco, but that's going to be probably more of a slot corner role. Otherwise, it's Pierce and then meh. So, what? I'll give it a fail.
I agree. None of these players really piqued my interest. Pierce was a fine pickup at 131, but the rest of it does not impress me. So one pick out of the group isn't going to save it.
Exactly. Saints, I'm right on the edge on. I reluctantly give it a pass. Taking the first corner Barron in the mid-third, I think is great value. He's going to be a good piece that's going to just by necessity be targeted because they don't want to throw at Patrick Surtain or other parts of that defense, and Barron is legit enough to make them pay. DK, two-way opportunity with him. We'll see what happens there. Felton, his ability to step in on offense for Minnesota, and Taj Brooks, I talked about how he's a really good complement to what they need in Cincinnati. I think his ability to outperform that role immediately. And then Tyler Barron, good grab at a premium position as well for what the Jets need, and I've seen good things out of camp so far. So definitely a pass for Saints.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, I like pretty much all of those picks. I think the Brooks pick is a fantastic one. Barron was great value. DK, great value. So, yeah.
Yep. Cowboys is a pass. Needed a receiver, especially I think with Devontae getting older. Golden's a great pick at 18. Michael Williams is a great pick at 126. He's already doing good things for the 49ers. Torrey Horton, I thought it was Tony Horton at first, so I was making P90X jokes. But definitely a good grab. Smaller prospect, but one that I don't mean necessarily from size. I mean, Colorado State isn't the same size as prospect as others, but I think it's commiserate with where he's being taken here. So I think that was a good pick. So just from those three, it's a pass, and then we'll see what Sorrell turns out to be.
Yeah, I thought every single one of these picks were fantastic. Love Golden, love Williams. I was shocked that Horton fell that far. I thought that was a fantastic pick, and Sorrell, I'm shocked that he lasted until the 4th round. So fantastic picks.
Yep. On to you, definitely a pass. Love the Hampton pick. I thought I was going to get him at 4, and I didn't. So good on you for there. I think some folks, especially with the long-term role, have him right next to Genty at the top of his class. Higgins. The sign that that's a right pick is there's an article in the Matt Berry Daily Newsletter a couple of days ago about people have sleeper fatigue on Jaden Higgins already. That tells you that getting him at 21, you got the right guy. Kenneth Grant, kind of getting one of those first round elite D tackles that went in this class. And again, he's a full round later than where he went in the real draft here. So that's nice. And then Oladejo, I think getting that level of talent at the end of the second round. And he's going to have an opportunity to make to break through in that starting lineup in Tennessee. So I like all 4 picks.
Yeah, I would give myself a pass. I think very highly of all these players. The Higgins part is very interesting. I think the whole guaranteed contract and just him being in the news cycles for probably about 2 weeks, people are very much fatigued on him. So they have started to talk about other players around his level. But yeah, I think they're all going to be productive. I would hope this year. Oladejo is, like, in my opinion, probably the best value. I thought he was going to go at the end of the first.
Yeah. Giants is a pass. Every player he picked is a player that he should have taken where he did. Fits well in terms of talent, fits well in terms of need. And every single one of those he can slot into the back end of his rotation. And by next year, probably gain value on all 5.
Yep, I agree. First 4 are amazing picks. Not the biggest fan of Martinez. Like the player, just Seattle's got a log jam at running back. But yeah, the other 4, I fully expect them to be worth way more than where they were drafted.
Yep. Commanders, definite pass. RJ Harvey's looking like a nice grab at 114. Jihad Campbell, first linebacker, I would say definitely worthy of that pick in the end of the first. Malachi Starks in the mid-second. He had to trade a much higher performing safety to move him and get that, so may not return that, but all in all, with Tesla and everything else, I think he's a pass.
Yeah, I think this is a pass. I think this is a fantastic draft. Starks, Campbell, amazing value. The wide receivers in the third, awesome value. Harvey might be one of the best picks in the whole draft.
Well, again, I think there's a lot of people are getting out over the skis on him. We got to remember the Marvin Mims experiment here, where I think Mims was the first receiver that got taken by this new coaching staff. And everyone said, hey, look at the speed, look at what he's doing, look at what Sean Payton has done with players like that. And don't get me wrong, Mims is not a bad player. But everyone was expecting Cortland Sutton type production out of him just because he went in the second. I'm expecting Harvey to do great things. I don't think he's as valuable necessarily as one of the top 5 guys of those running backs, but a lot of opportunity for him to prove us wrong. And Commanders has made a good point. The running back room for not Sean McVay, for
Sean Payton.
Thank you. Is been number 1 or number 2 for quite a few years. There's other players in the room other than just RJ Harvey.
Yep.
Okay. 49ers. Fail. If nothing else, just because he's been doing nothing but talking about Tommy Malott for 3 days. this team is ready for the rebuild, and nothing that happened in this draft is really going to change the opinion of that. Just yeah. Last couple teams, Arizona Cardinals. Yeah, I think Cardinals nailed this draft as well. Egbuka, Judkins, Kyle Williams, Izarike, TJ Sanders, Jordan Birch, Mark Turner, Orlando Gadsden. Cardinals seem to be drafting very often from the same list that I was. So, from a selfish perspective, I'll give him a for sure pass and maybe the gold star of the draft, because I think he's got value all over the place here. I think Turner competes. Shamar Turner competes to get his way into that D-end rotation, getting that in the third. Gadsden has a real shot at that starting tight end role for the Chargers. TJ Sanders, again, going to work his way in there. I love Ezerike and everything he brings at the 205. Williams is getting rave reviews in New England. Again, same kind of pumping the brakes as with RJ Harvey, but he got this guy 11 picks later, so giving him a little bit more, leeway on that. And then Egbuka and Judkins at 110 and 113. I think if we go back to the mock drafts, I don't think anyone thought they were getting out of the top 10. And he got both of them at 110 and 113. So great draft for the Cardinals.
Yep, I agree. I like every single one of these picks.
Rams taking one pick, and that's Cleo Mullins. I love it. Best comparable on a site I was looking at to Hassan Haskins, going to a team to play and replace Hassan Haskins. Sold. And then last but not least, the Sea Chickens. Will Johnson in the supplemental third. Great pick, depending on how bad the injuries are that made him drop in to the second in the real life draft anyway. But, for one pick, not a bad pick to make.
Yeah, I agree.
So that is our draft recap. Kind of moving on to, we'll do a post-draft power ranks and updated predictions and things like that. But we're to that point where we're probably going to start settling into the summer months here, where outside of some of the rookie mini camps, news is going to slow down, activity is going to slow down as people settle into their summers, and that's okay. But I think we've got the offseason free agency that's kicked back up, which is fun to see. A lot of rookies still going sort of in the UDFA realm. For us, a lot of teams kind of rounding out their rosters to get to 40 players, 100 years, close to the cap, all those wonderful things. And I think everyone still loves their picks, so I'm not sure how much training we'll see, but I'm always for that. Any, I guess, either high level or directive thoughts that you have in terms of where things are now, RJ?
Not particularly. Like you said, I expect us to be going into the summer months. It'll probably be quiet until we get into camp and things like that. I would urge everybody to stay active, try to shape your teams in the way you want, with the expectations of how you think things will shake out in the off season. Just don't forget about everything and basically start with a clean slate in 2 or 3 months, because you'll forget all of the homework and due diligence that you've done so far in the off season.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. As an hour of quality content right there. See if there have been any trades since we talked last week. There may have been some in-draft trades to move into picks, and then I think a couple of taxi thefts, but nothing major unless I'm misremembering.
No, nothing too exciting.
Yeah, that's kind of holding up. Yeah, future fourth, future fifth for Donta Foreman into 403. Turn around and adding a supplemental fifth this year to the Colts to dump him, just so Colts can get Mr. Irrelevant. More dumps. A couple of thirst traps in terms of
the Rattler trade.
Yeah. Aiden O'Connell for 531. Yeah, I mean, it's a whole lot of flash, not a whole lot of substance. Actually, not even a whole lot of flash, just a lot of trades.
Yep.
All right. Parting thoughts before we close out?
No, nothing too particular. I think I said enough.
All right. We'll get into sort of the rest of the post-draft comments and content in the coming weeks. Till then, hope everyone enjoyed the draft process. And, happy free agency and happy trading.